know that it was painted, in the same way that I don't think we recognise that this universe was apparently designed by a creator just because it exists. In fact, I would dispute the use of the word creation because it actually tips the argument and says that the universe was deliberately made. The reason that we know that paintings have been painted by painters, and we know that pizzas are things which have been cooked and delivered, is that we recognise them as things where we have seen the delivery boy in prior cases. We've had things that... Sorry, can I ask the technicians to just go back into Sam's PowerPoint? You don't mind, you just by the way. You here? Anyone? Oh. Thanks, Adam. Well, I won't be patronising. You all saw the pizza there, which sounds really profound. You all saw the pizza. But there's lots of things that look like that we've all seen. I mean, if you had a pizza on your doorstep, you would have been in that situation before, probably. You would have seen something that looked a lot like it, similar kind of arrangements of bread and pastry and cheese. And when you'd seen that before, it had been brought to you by someone. Ah, thank you. It's a lovely pizza, I must say. And for the same reason, if we found a wristwatch, we wouldn't know that it was something that had been manufactured because it was complex, which is the argument that's often made. We would recognise it because it's something which is familiar to us. Actually, Paley's argument was that we saw complexity in a design thing like a wristwatch or a machine or something like that. And we recognised it had been made because it didn't look like something natural, which I think actually refutes itself as an argument. If, for example, aliens had come to this planet, and I'm not proposing that they have, and had deposited some kind of biomechanical thing that was actually a pizza or, say, a painting, but looked exactly like a leaf, would we then know that it was a pizza or a painting, with the absence of someone who made it? I don't think we would have any way of doing that. So I think this whole kind of argument of we can know that it's something that it is, without having seen the person make it, is really just kind of slightly spurious. But I will say this, I know we have lots of theists in the room, I'm presuming you're all members of particular religions. I'm certainly not here to say that religion is harmful, or that belief does not help people. But I do think that if you're going to propose something like the existence of God, you need to make a sound argument. And actually I feel that I have to wait for these two to come back. But I really just want to know, what do you believe and why? And then Peter Atkins and I will be able to respond in much more lucid terms. Because I think, frankly, the onus is on you, and once we can actually pick your argument apart, it will be interesting. But yes, I think a lot of things have come up tonight. And I'm slightly kind of reluctant to accept this thing of rationalism as something that falls between blind faith and science, in the way that I don't think there is an in-between between believing in God and being someone who doesn't. Either something is blind faith or it's not. The word rational has ratio in it, because it says that if we make a claim, we need to provide a fitting amount of evidence for it. There has to be a good ratio there. So, for example, if any of you told me that you had cornflakes or Weetabix for breakfast, or pizza, if you're that kind of person, then I wouldn't really have any particular need to be sceptical, because it's not a statement that requires a lot of evidence to be true. If, however, you suggest that the universe is the creation of God, or for that matter, say, I don't know, Julie Andrews or someone like that, then you really need to provide a much stronger argument. That's what the scientific method says. I'm not a scientist myself, I must say. You actually need to kind of justify what you think, because if you don't, then anything goes. Thank you. I'm at my 5-minute mark. And yeah, I must admit that I don't have a lot to say, because as far as I'm concerned, not a lot of actual argument for God has been made. But so, I will wait for the theists in the room to come back on that. But just to stress the point slightly more, Peter Atkins earlier spoke, and he used an example which came from Bertrand Russell. He said that we can't actually prove that there aren't teapots flying around the sun. If anyone watches Glee, there was a reference to that in the dialogue recently, which is great. But there's lots of things in the world that we can't prove not to be the case. We can't prove, for example, that there isn't a herd of reindeer walking around on the roof of this building. We might go up and look, but they might have moved. Similarly, you can't prove that there isn't an invisible unicorn standing next to me. So I don't consider that... Oh, does anyone think you can? No? There was an interesting reaction. Sorry, go on. I'm glad I'm being engaging, I must say. It's very often said that, that the existence of God can't be disproven. I think it depends on the God personally. And that because it can't be disproven, we should somehow hover and not decide whether we believed in it or not. But either you're someone who finds it a convincing statement that there is a creator or some kind of supernatural agency that oversees the universe, or you're one of the other people who exist in the world. There isn't really anything in between. An atheist is not someone necessarily who claims to know absolutely 100% that there is no God. And it's very hard to know most things 100%. There are some, thank you. We can know reasonably 100%, for example, that 5 plus 5 is 10, because that's a system of mathematics we've created, we understand it. Equally, I would state that I can know that my next breath will not kill me. I wouldn't say that I can know that 100%, but for example, the volume of this room means that I could probably have quite a good model of the different gas exchanges that are going on in here. Probably the level of oxygen has gone down slightly and the level of CO2 has risen slightly since we've all been in the room. I can perhaps state that we haven't been in long enough, and won't be tonight, that all the air in here will suddenly become toxic. That actually makes me sound rather militant and angry, doesn't it? The idea of us all suddenly dying. But just to sort of quickly recap into some of the things that Hassan stated, one of the first things he created was this interesting binary position between a universe which is finite and began, and is not just there and always has been, and a universe which goes on forever, temporally or spatially or whatever. And he said that if the universe had a beginning, he called it a creation, I would simply say a beginning, then there must be someone who made it. I think that's an enormous logical leap, personally, because actually lots of things in the world just exist without having been made by mankind. I mean, the basis of the argument I suspect will be made is that things in the world which are striking in nature, I don't know, waterfalls, the human eyeball, whatever, are complex or such that they are in some way analogous to something that's been created by a human being. But the whole thrust of that argument is that we need to explain the fact that they weren't. This thing looks like something that we've created because it's, thank you, complicated, or whatever else. And therefore, it must somehow have been made. I think all that rests on the idea that things about the universe are incredulous and can't be understood if there isn't a God. So my final statement is just that if there's something in the universe that we don't know or we can't understand, and there are lots, science doesn't claim to know everything, then it's not okay just to fill the hole with anything. You just need to say, I don't know, if you don't get it. Right, thank you.
After 10 minutes. Assalamu alaikum and welcome. And I echo the thanks of my colleague here to the organisers. I kind of feel a bit sorry for Alex because unfortunately he didn't have an argument to latch on to attack. Now the professor could have done him a favour and presented a positive case for atheism, even though you don't have to, but he could have done. The closest the professor got was that saying something along the lines of there are ways of talking about an uncaused first event without a creator. Well, it would be lovely and wonderful to have heard this argument so that I could get my teeth into something. So the position I find myself in is having to present an argument for atheism and present the argument for God as well. Next time, I suggest you go second, or present an argument first. Okay. Hassan has very kindly set up a framework in which we can approach this problem. I get to do the easy bit, and I like doing the easy bit. what I'm going to do is present a contemporary expression of the Kalam cosmological argument. And if I've got some time left, I'll cover some simplistic refutations of the argument. God makes sense of the origin of the universe. So we will ask, where do we come from? Why does something exist rather than nothing? Did the universe have a beginning? Typically, atheists try to avoid this question and go in an opposite direction. So a positive argument for atheism, some atheists would say that the universe is eternal and uncaused. So let's quote Bertrand Russell, it was quoted earlier. The universe is just there, and that's all. But what I would argue is that that's irrational, in that a thinking mind would have considerable difficulty in accepting this unsubstantiated statement. And the reason that's the case is the problem of infinity. So let's examine Bertrand Russell's statement under any type of logic or rational framework. It leads us to problems. Because if the universe existed forever, it would mean that our past and our history is also infinite and forever. So can we have an infinite set of past events? Well, no, because that would lead to a set of absurd contradictions. And the best way to demonstrate it is by example. So, imagine two lines centered on me, one going that way and one going that way. And these lines go on for infinity. Line 1, line 2. If I were to ask, what is the distance between these two lines? You could argue reasonably that an answer would be, well, actually, it's infinite because this is going on forever, this is going on forever, so the distance between the two lines is infinite. But someone could equally argue the opposite and say, well, actually, at any point, the distance between the two lines is between 2 points and is actually finite. So you've got a problem there, an absurd contradiction. Let's take another example. What's your name, the gentleman in the red jumper looking down?
Jonathan.
Jonathan. And your name over there?
Shazam.
Okay, Fazan. Now, in the intro, Fazan and Jonathan, excellent. Now, in the intro, the publicity for this, this is Imperial, but he said that this will undoubtedly be the greatest and most entertaining event this year. There's something to live up to, doesn't it? So, invite anyone, everyone. Okay. Now, let's say that publicity was actually true, and instead of having the number of people we had in the audience, we had an infinite number of rows going back, an infinite amount of people in the audience. And I asked Jonathan and Fazan, sorry if I pronounced it wrong, to leave the room. How many people would be left in the room? Still an infinite amount of people. But hang on, infinity minus 2 should be less than infinity. Okay, but if it's something less than infinity, we should be able to count it. But it's infinity and we can't count it. Again, we're in an absurd contradictory position. Third example. Well, okay. 100 people in the room. And we add 1 a second, right? Are we ever going to get to an infinite number of people? No, because at every second you go, every point you go, you will be able to add another one. Okay, last example. Say you wanted to borrow a book called Creation Revisited, or Galileo's Finger, from the Imperial University Library. And you had let's be respectful, you had 40 people in front of you queuing up for this book. You'd have to wait 40. If you had 40, you have to wait for 40 people. If you had 400 people queuing up for this book, you'd have to wait for 400 people to give the book back, and you'd get it then. But if you had an infinite amount of people queuing up for this book, and you join the end of that queue, you're not going to get the book. You'll never get your hands on the book, and in a similar way, you can't have an infinite set of past events. And you start getting a feel now as to why famous philosophers said the concept of infinity doesn't really export very well into